The sound of shattering crystal echoed through the dinner table. The glass slipped from Clara's hand, red wine spilling across the white tablecloth like a streak of blood. At the table, Ethan, her only son, stood up, his voice as cold as steel. "You have nothing left to give Mother. Stop staying here and getting in our way." Lydia, his wife, smiled faintly, setting her phone down carefully as if afraid to miss the moment. Outside, rain poured over Ashford Creek wind, lashing against the windows. Inside, the warm glow of the family home had turned into a stage for betrayal. Clara sat still, her trembling hand resting on the napkin. She had once taught Ethan how to hold a knife, and Fork had cut his meat into small pieces when he was too young to do it himself. Now her son looked at her as if she were a stranger. "Why would you say that?" she asked, her voice catching in her throat. "I contributed everything to this house." Ethan laughed without a trace of pity. "This house is mine and you. You have no job, no income, no contribution. I can't keep supporting you forever." His words fell like a hammer. Clara felt herself shrink in the room that had once been filled with laughter. Lydia crossed her legs and said lightly, "You could find somewhere more affordable. There are good retirement homes out there. At your age, proper medical care is what matters." Clara stood up, her eyes glinting under the light. "And where do you expect me to go in the middle of a stormy night?" No one answered. Only the clinking of a spoon against a plate broke the silence. Ethan turned away, tossing a set of car keys onto the table. "Take your old car. I've already moved your things outside. Don't make this harder for us." The keys landed beside a plate of salmon, the metallic clink sounding like the final period to a long sentence. Clara slowly walked toward the door, each step dragging the weight of the past. Outside, rain poured down in sheets. She opened the door, the cold wind whipping through her silver hair. Before stepping out, she turned back. Her gaze at her son was not filled with anger, but with something deeper, a sorrow touched by understanding. "You don't understand, Ethan. I've lost everything once before, and I've learned that a person is only truly poor when they've lost love." The door closed and thunder rumbled in the distance. Her old silver sedan became her only shelter. Clara sat inside, listening to the rain drum against the roof like a heartbeat. Her breath fogged up the windows. Her frail hands gripped the steering wheel fingers that once danced across piano keys, now cold and trembling. She looked into the rearview mirror, her reflection blurred by the dim streetlight. Tired eyes hollow yet unbroken. A memory flashed before her. When Ethan was little, he used to cry in fear of thunder crawling into her arms for warmth. Clara had held him and whispered, "It's all right, my son. The rain is just the sky's way of washing away its sadness." Now it was she who was being cleansed, stripped of the last illusions of family. She drove into the night with no destination. The street lights flickered across her tear-streaked face. As the car rolled over the old bridge leading out of town, the engine sputtered and died. Clara tried turning the key, but the motor only groaned weakly. She sighed, leaning back in her seat as the rain grew heavier. In that moment, she realized she was at the edge of solitude itself. Yet what she felt wasn't despair, but a strange, quiet calm. Clara smiled softly through the downpour. "At least this time I'm free," she murmured, closing her eyes and letting the rain sing her to sleep. Near midnight, the distant sound of an engine pulled her back to consciousness. Headlights swept across her mirror and a black SUV stopped nearby. A door opened and a man stepped out, gray-haired, wrapped in a thick coat, his sharp eyes cutting through the darkness. Clara. The voice made her freeze. It had been more than 20 years since she last heard it. "Thomas," she whispered, her voice trembling. He nodded, walking toward her holding an umbrella large enough to cover them both. His eyes were filled with compassion. "I've been searching for you for 3 months. You can't just disappear like that." Clara said nothing, unsure whether to cry or smile. Thomas took her hand, draping his coat over her shoulders. "I'm not leaving you alone again. Come with me." As they walked together through the rain, Clara turned back to look at the old car, the place that had been both her home and witness to her downfall. She didn't know that within days her life would take a turn no one could have imagined, and the woman cast out tonight would become the center of a story few would believe. In her heart, her mother's old words echoed clearly, as if they'd never faded. "When people push you out the door, don't be afraid. It only means you're about to step into somewhere better." The rain kept falling, but now each drop no longer felt cold. It felt like a beginning. The pale morning light streamed through the car window as Clara woke up. For a moment she thought she was still dreaming. The sound of waves echoed in the distance. The scent of salt and warm sea air drifted in like an unfamiliar melody. Before her stretched a stone-paved road leading to a vast villa hidden among palm trees. The deep blue Santa Catalina Sea spread endlessly like a giant silk sheet shimmering under the sun. Thomas stopped the car and turned to her with a gentle smile. "Welcome home." Clara froze. She looked around speechless. White villas with red-tiled roofs, polished stone steps, and windows opening toward the sea. All of it looked as if it had stepped out of a dream of luxury. "You said home," she murmured. Thomas nodded. "This is where I live, and from now on, so do you." They walked into the grand hall, filled with the scent of oak wood and lavender. Everything was elegant and calm, not lavish in a showy way, but peaceful and warm. Clara felt out of place, like a wanderer, lost in a world that wasn't hers. Thomas set down her old suitcase, his smile kind. "I had a room prepared for you, but first you should rest. You must not have slept much last night." Clara nodded softly. She was tired, but her mind was full of questions. How did Thomas find her? And why, after all these years, had he still been searching? In the living room, the housekeeper appeared a tall woman with neatly tied hair and intelligent eyes. "Breakfast is ready, Mr. Mayfield," she said in a calm, authoritative voice. "Thank you, Nora," Thomas replied, then turned to his sister. "This is Nora, the person I trust most. You can ask her for anything you need." Breakfast was served on the veranda, toast, orange marmalade, fried eggs, and black coffee. Clara held her cup, her hand trembling slightly. "You still like your coffee strong, no sugar, right?" Thomas asked, as if time had never passed. She smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. "You still remember. I remember everything he said. The mornings when Mother made us get up early to practice piano and how you threw a pillow at me every time I played offbeat." They both laughed, though there was a catch in their laughter. As the sea breeze grew stronger, Clara pulled her shawl tighter, her smile fading. "Why did you look for me, Thomas? After all these years, I disappeared from everything. You didn't have to trouble yourself." Thomas met her eyes. "Because I owe you Clara. I wasn't there when you lost your home, your husband, and the son you once trusted with your life." Clara lowered her gaze, tears falling onto her hand. Thomas continued, his voice low and firm. "I was too busy with work chasing meaningless things. But when I heard you'd gone missing, I realized nothing matters more than family. I hired people to find you everywhere. When I saw your old car parked under the bridge, I knew it was you." She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In that moment, the brother who had once been distant and stern suddenly felt warm again, like when they were children. "I didn't bring you here just to help you," Thomas said slowly. "I need you too. I want us to rebuild what our family has lost." Clara looked up and saw in his eyes something both sorrowful and steadfast. She was about to speak when Nora returned holding a thick cream-colored envelope. "Sir, the documents arrived this morning," she said. Thomas took it, then handed it directly to Clara. "I was going to wait until this afternoon, but now feels right." Clara looked at the envelope, puzzled. "What is this house papers?" he replied. She blinked in disbelief. "Whose house?" "A seaside villa nearby under your name along with a savings account enough so you'll never have to worry about money again." His tone was calm, as if he were talking about the weather. Clara set down her cup, her heart pounding. "No, you can't. I don't need this." Thomas shook his head. "You do, and I want this for you. I've planned it for a long time. You deserve to live with dignity, not trembling in the dark." Nora stood quietly nearby, her eyes glistening with emotion. Clara opened the envelope. Inside was a property certificate and a bank statement showing a transfer of $8 million. She was stunned, unable to believe her eyes. "How did you—" Thomas smiled. "I simply used what I can't take with me. You'll take it further than I ever could." Clara shook her head, tears spilling over. She felt small in the face of such a gift. From a woman cast out of her home, she was now sitting in a seaside mansion with an open future ahead. "You didn't have to do this," she whispered. "I didn't do it because I had to," he said. "I did it because I want to see you stand tall. So when I leave this world, I'll know you're no longer afraid." In that moment, Clara felt as if the storm from the night before had washed away every trace of humiliation. She took his hand, his touch cold but steady. "Thank you, Thomas." "Don't thank me," he said softly. "Live. And when you're strong again, teach them, the ones who look down on you, the true worth of a woman." Outside, the sea roared. The wind lifted the white curtains, and the first sunlight of the day illuminated the face of a woman stepping out of the shadows. Clara closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Inside her, a new fire was burning, the fire of dignity and the will to rise again. She didn't yet know that along with the gift, Thomas had given her a battle to fight. And in that battle, Clara Mayfield would no longer be the fragile woman who had once been cast aside. The next morning, the sunlight over Santa Catalina was soft and golden like a ribbon of silk. Clara opened the window and the sea breeze rushed in, carrying the scent of salt and the fragrance of white flowers from the terrace. Below the hill, the waves crashed against the rocks, echoing a deep, steady rhythm like an ancient song. She stood there for a long moment, gazing at the unfamiliar beauty before her, still unable to believe she was really here. Just one night ago, she had been trembling inside an old car under a bridge. Now she was standing in a spacious room with white curtains swaying gently, a wardrobe filled with clothes, and a bed draped in lavender-scented silk sheets. The feeling was surreal, like a dream woven by fate's compassion. Nora knocked softly. "Mrs. Mayfield, breakfast is ready. Mr. Thomas is waiting on the terrace." Clara nodded. "Thank you, Nora. And please don't call me Mrs. Mayfield, just Clara." Nora smiled. "All right, Clara. But I think you should start getting used to being treated with respect." The words caught Clara off guard. She followed Nora down the stairs, each step feeling like a crossing into another lifetime. The terrace overlooked the sea with a small table already set, black coffee peach-filled pastries, and a neatly folded newspaper. Thomas sat reading, looking healthier than the day before. The morning light caught his silver hair, making it shine like pure silver. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, not looking up from the paper. "Better than I have in years," Clara replied, "but I still don't understand. Why me? You could have chosen anyone to help." Thomas folded the newspaper, his eyes serious yet kind. "I didn't choose to help you, Clara. I chose to make things right. Years ago, when our parents died, I left you to carry all the debts alone while I chased ambition. You lost more than I ever realized. I owe you the life you should have had." Clara stayed silent, her chest tightening. Memories flooded back those years of working 2 jobs to raise her son and pay off the family's debts, the long, lonely nights waiting for a brother who had vanished without a word. Thomas stood and walked to the railing, gazing out at the sea. "I can't turn back time," he said, "but I can make sure the rest of your life will be different. Everything is arranged. All you have to do is live." Clara smiled faintly. "You always say that, but living isn't that easy." They were silent for a while. The only sounds were the waves and the cries of seagulls. Suddenly, a small delivery truck stopped at the gate. Nora stepped out, handed Thomas an envelope, and returned. A package for Mrs. Clara. Clara opened it. Inside was a set of silver keys and a small map. "Where is this villa?" she asked. "By the southern bay," Thomas replied. "About a 15-minute drive from here. It has a garden, a music room, and a view of the sea. I want you to have a place that's truly yours, where you won't have to depend on anyone again." Clara looked at the map, her eyes wet. "I don't know what to say." Thomas smiled. "Just say you'll start over." That afternoon, Nora drove her to the new house. The coastal road curved along the cliffs, sunlight glinting off the water like scattered silver dust. When the car stopped at the gate, Clara caught her breath. The villa was 2 stories high, painted white with blue tiled roofs, its walls draped in purple bougainvillea. The windows opened toward the sea, and on the porch sat a wooden bench, the perfect place to listen to the waves all day long. "It's breathtaking," Clara whispered. Nora nodded. Mr. Thomas picked every detail himself. He said this house needed to have a soul. They walked through the garden where the scent of jasmine filled the air and birds chirped among the trees. Inside, the living room held a walnut piano polished to a soft gleam under the afternoon light. On top of it was an old photo in a wooden frame. 2 children, a boy and a girl, smiling brightly side by side. Clara's hands trembled as she picked it up. He still kept this picture. "He never throws away anything that belongs to family," Nora said quietly. As the evening came, they sat on the terrace drinking tea. The wind played with Clara's hair. Nora asked softly, "Do you ever regret staying silent when people treated you badly?" Clara thought for a moment. "I do regret it, but I was never afraid. Because I knew that if I spoke before I was strong enough, people would only hear a weak cry. Now it's different." Her eyes glimmered, calm yet resolute. That night, Clara didn't sleep right away. She sat by the piano, gently pressing the keys. The melody was clear and tender, filled with longing. She played Moon River, her late husband's favorite song. In the moonlit room, her heart finally began to settle. Suddenly, the phone rang. On the screen, Ethan's name appeared. She hesitated, then answered. "I wasn't going to call," his dry voice said, "but I saw your picture online. Someone caught you with some old man. What's going on?" Clara stayed silent. His tone carried that same familiar arrogance. "Who is he? Are you selling your poor little old mother story for money now?" A chill ran down her spine. "That man is my brother," she said evenly, "the one you never cared to ask about." Ethan scoffed. "Your brother? You hid an entire family. You always have secrets, don't you?" "Secrets," Clara replied slowly, "are simply things that some people don't deserve to know." She ended the call, her heart unexpectedly calm. Outside, the waves whispered like a lullaby. That night, Clara understood that these peaceful days wouldn't last long. But this time, she had a place to stand her ground. And if the past came knocking, she would not hide any more. Because now, in a seaside villa glowing through the night, the woman once cast aside finally had an entire world to protect. The morning light over Santa Catalina Bay shimmered like a giant mirror. The sea was calm, white sails flickered in the distance. Clara woke early, brewed her tea, and sat on the balcony, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Sunlight filtered through her silver hair, casting a soft glow on her serene yet thoughtful face. From afar came the cries of seagulls blending with the rhythmic sound of the waves, like the steady breath of another world, peaceful yet fragile. Nora entered the room carrying a thick envelope. This morning's mail, Mrs. Clara. Clara opened it and found a local newspaper. On page 3 was a photo of her and Thomas walking together near the pier, with a bold headline, "Billionaire Thomas Mayfield, spotted with a mysterious woman." His long-lost sister. Clara froze. The cup in her hand trembled, a few drops spilling onto the wooden table. Dear God, they're following him. Nora nodded. They always follow people with money, but I think this time it's worse. Before Clara could ask, the phone rang. Thomas's name appeared on the screen. Clara, don't worry, his deep, raspy voice said. That article is just the beginning. I know who's behind it. Who, she asked quietly. Ethan and his wife. I've been told someone leaked rumors to the press claiming you were using me for money. The words cut through the air like a cold blade. Clara gripped the phone tightly, her eyes blazing. My son did this. After everything, Thomas was silent for a moment, then spoke gently. It's not just greed, Clara. It's fear. They're afraid because they see you're no longer alone. Clara took a deep breath. I don't want my name in the papers, Thomas. I just want peace. I know, he said softly, but you have to be ready. Peace never lasts long once people realize you found it. That afternoon, Thomas arrived. He carried a stack of documents, his expression weary. We need to talk seriously, he began. Clara, I'm not well. The doctors say my heart can't handle another surgery. She stared at him in shock. You hid this from me. Not hid, he said quietly. I just didn't want you to worry. But there's something I need to do before it's too late. He slid the folder toward her. These are the papers transferring the house and the $8 million account into your name. Full ownership, Thomas. No, Clara protested. You need to keep it. You're still alive, you still. He stopped her with a calm look. Do you think I'm doing this out of pity? No. This is how I protect you from those who will come back for blood. Clara didn't respond. Emotion welled up in her chest, mixed with fear. Ethan won't stop, Thomas continued. He'll try to take what's yours, try to tarnish your name, try to make you believe you're weak, but this time you won't fall. Clara's voice trembled. I don't want to fight Thomas. I'm tired. He placed a hand on her shoulder. Sometimes, living with dignity is already a form of battle. They sat in silence. The crimson sunset spilled across the room, glowing in their eyes. Clara held her brother's hand tightly, feeling her fear slowly transform into something else resolve. That evening, Nora brought a small wooden box. Mr. Thomas asked me to give this to you. Clara opened it. Inside were old photographs, a faded letter, and a leather-bound notebook. On the cover, written in Thomas's handwriting, were the words, "For Clara," who never knew how strong she truly was. She opened it and saw his familiar handwriting filling every page Thomas's journal. Each entry told of his years searching for her, the times he hired people to check nursing homes and shelters. On one page, a line stood out scrawled hastily, "If I find her, I'll spend the rest of my life making it right." Tears filled Clara's eyes. That night, she went out to the balcony. The sea was dark moonlight scattering silver across the waves. She held the journal to her chest and whispered, "You've done enough, Thomas. Now it's my turn." From inside, Nora stepped out with a cup of tea. "You shouldn't stay in the wind too long. Mr. Thomas worries about you." Clara gave a faint smile. He may not say it, but I know his condition is worse than he lets on. Nora looked at her with gentle honesty. He believes you'll stand tall when he's gone. He said you're the only one who truly knows what it means to lose everything and still keep living. Clara gripped the balcony railing. She listened to the waves, and what she felt inside was no longer fear, but something deeper, a silent promise to herself. In the distance, the city lights flickered, signaling the night's arrival. Inside, the phone on the table lit up. A message from an unknown number appeared. "We know you're holding Mr. Mayfield's assets. Don't forget blood still has rights." Clara read it again and again, her heart turning cold. She lifted her gaze toward the sea. The wind grew stronger, waves crashing harder, as if the ocean itself sensed the storm that was coming. But this time she did not tremble. The woman who had once been thrown out of her home was ready, and if they dared to come for her, they would learn what it meant to touch the fire that had just awakened within her heart. Dawn broke, and sunlight streamed through the window, filling Clara's room with a warm, golden glow. But this morning, the light brought no peace. The phone on her desk was still lit, the threatening message from the night before, lingering like an unhealed scar. She sat silently before her cold cup of tea, her eyes staring into the distance toward the sea. The waves rolled steadily, but inside her, another tide was rising, a tide of memories, anger, and quiet pain. A soft knock broke the stillness. Nora stepped in, holding a newspaper. "The news spread faster than I expected," she said softly. "They're calling you the mysterious woman who inherited the vast fortune of Thomas Mayfield. The story's been shared thousands of times online." Clara closed her eyes. "People always crave stories they'll never truly understand. And whoever sent that message," Nora added, "wants more than to just scare you." She laid the newspaper on the table, pointing to a photograph. Ethan and Lydia, Clara's son and daughter-in-law, were seen leaving a law office in Los Angeles. The image was grainy, but their expressions were unmistakable cold, calculating, stripped of any trace of family warmth. Clara gave a faint, bitter smile. "I raised him, taught him compassion, and now he uses the law to calculate against his own mother." Nora said nothing. Her eyes were sad but filled with respect. "What will you do?" she asked. Clara rose slowly. "Live as if fear never existed." That afternoon, Clara drove to the hospital where Thomas was being treated. He lay in a private room, his face pale but his eyes still bright. "You're here," he said with a weak smile. "I guessed you wouldn't be able to sit still." Clara sat by his bedside and took his hand. "I received another message. They're watching. I know Ethan won't stop." Thomas nodded. "I expected that. I've already spoken with Grace, my attorney. She'll protect you when I can't." Clara's heart tightened. "Don't say that." Thomas looked at her steadily, his tone calm but heavy. "I'm not afraid of dying, Clara. I'm afraid of leaving you before you're strong enough to stand alone. But maybe I was wrong. You're stronger than I ever imagined." Clara's grip on his hand tightened. "I don't want money or fame. I just want you to be well." He smiled faintly. "Money doesn't matter, but justice does. They need to understand that greed always comes with a price." A gust of wind slipped through the window, carrying with it the faint sound of the sea. Thomas closed his eyes and murmured, "I've arranged for all remaining assets to be transferred into the Mayfield Foundation. I want you to run it. Use it to help those who've been treated like you once were." Clara said nothing. His words pierced her heart like a needle, stitching her pain into strength. On her way home, she stopped by the shore. The sun was setting its orange glow, spilling across the water like a great flame. She opened her notebook and wrote a single line, Day one of a new life, learning to protect what's been given, not with fear, but with courage. When she returned, Nora was waiting. "Something arrived for you," she said quietly. "No sender." Clara opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper written in black ink. "If you're smart, you'll share the inheritance. Otherwise, we'll make the world believe you deceived a dying man." Clara stared at the words for a long time, then smiled coldly. "They think I'll be afraid like before." "What will you do?" Nora asked. "Face them," Clara replied calmly. "No more hiding. This time they'll see me for who I am now, not the trembling mother from that rainy night." That night she called Grace to introduce herself. The young lawyer's voice was steady and confident. "I worked with Mr. Thomas for over 10 years. He trusted you completely, and I trust anyone brave enough to rise again." Clara said, "If they plan to attack me, let them. I'll show them how a woman once cast aside can defend herself." Grace paused for a moment before answering. "Good. We'll prepare. But remember, don't fight with emotion, fight with reason. They'll never understand that calmness is the most dangerous form of retaliation." When the call ended, Clara stepped out onto the balcony. Waves crashed against the rocks below, spraying white foam into the air. Her heartbeat was slow but steady. "Thomas," she whispered, "you were right. I don't need anyone's pity. I just need a chance to stand." In the darkness, her phone lit up once more. A new message appeared. "We'll see you soon, Mother." Clara looked at the screen without a hint of fear. She smiled a cold, steady smile of someone who had once been drowned and learned to breathe underwater. The storm had arrived, but this time, she was its center. That afternoon, the sky over Santa Catalina turned to a dull gray. The sea was restless waves curling and crashing as wind howled through the palms outside. Clara stood on the balcony, her hands gripping the railing eyes, tracing the white-tipped waves below. She could feel the storm approaching, not just from the ocean, but from the people who once called her mother. Nora stepped out, holding a phone. "You should see this," she said quietly. On the screen was a freshly uploaded video. Lydia, her daughter-in-law, sat before the camera, her makeup flawless, her voice dripping with sorrow. "We just want to help my mother-in-law," Lydia said softly. "She's not well and someone's taking advantage of her. We're afraid she's going to lose everything." The video then cut to an image of Clara holding Thomas's hand in the hospital, her face drawn with worry. Beneath it, the comments poured in: "Greedy old woman," "Gold digger," "Shameful." Clara set the phone down without expression. "They perform well," she murmured. "Now the whole world believes I stole from my dying brother." Nora reached over, grasping her hand. "Don't react. Grace said she's handling it. You just need to stay calm." Clara nodded, though inside her, a fire had already ignited. That evening, Grace arrived. The young lawyer was petite, but her gaze was sharp as glass. She spread the documents across the table, speaking firmly. "They've hired a media firm to manipulate public opinion. The goal is to pressure you into signing over the assets. But I already have proof that the funding for this campaign came from a trust under Ethan's name." Clara gave a quiet smile. "They think this will break me. But the more they try to humiliate me, the more reason I have to fight." Grace nodded. "I want you to record a short statement. Keep your tone calm, no anger, no defense, just the truth. They'll crumble when they see you won't lose control." That night, Clara sat before the small camera Grace had brought. No makeup, no bright lights, just her face lined with time, her eyes dark but unwavering. "My name is Clara Mayfield," she began. "I don't need money. I have enough to live quietly. I only want the truth to be known. I've never taken from anyone and I've never asked for anything. If I'm guilty of anything, it's of trusting the wrong people." Her voice was low, steady, each word falling like a stone into still water. When it ended, Grace looked at her and said softly, "Perfect." The next morning, the video was posted on the official Mayfield Foundation account. Within hours, it had hundreds of thousands of views. Comments flooded in. "That woman's calm is terrifying. Her eyes don't lie." By noon, Ethan called. His voice was cold, laced with restrained fury. "Mother, I don't understand why you had to make this public." Clara's voice was quiet, controlled. "Because you made it public first. I was only trying to protect you by hiring people to destroy my name." Silence stretched on the line. "Mother," he said, finally his tone cracking, "you're ruining everything. You know how dangerous the media can be. They'll dig into your past." Clara gave a small, weary laugh. "Let them dig. They'll find a woman who was poor, who was thrown out of her own house by her son, and that truth will make them stand with me." When the call ended, Clara looked out to sea. The waves still roared, but inside she felt an unfamiliar calm. That evening, Thomas called from the hospital, his voice frail but proud. "I saw the video. Well done, Clara. You've stepped into the light. Don't ever step back." "You need to rest," she said softly. "I don't want you worrying." "I'm not worried," he said. "I'm proud." When the call ended, Clara walked out to the veranda. The wind whipped through her silver hair, tugging at her shawl. She looked up at the sky, dark clouds swirling, warning of a storm that was no longer distant. Nora rushed out, breathless. "News just came in. Ethan and Lydia are on their way here." Clara nodded, her eyes glinting. "Good. It's time to look them in the eye." A low rumble of thunder rolled across the bay. From the road leading to the shore, headlights flashed through the rain. The SUV stopped at the gate, and Ethan and Lydia stepped out under a black umbrella. Clara didn't retreat. She stood beneath the porch, waiting. Ethan looked up, his expression caught between arrogance and unease. "We need to talk privately," he said. Clara's tone was calm, unwavering. "There's no private left between us, son. From now on, everything will be said in the open." The wind rose, scattering jasmine petals across the path. A bolt of lightning split the sky, illuminating 3 faces. The mother who had reclaimed her strength, the son terrified of the truth, and the young woman who didn't yet understand that her greed was about to demand its price. The storm broke, but this time Clara didn't hide inside an old car. She stood tall in the rain, her gaze steady, unflinching. The confrontation had begun. That night, rain poured down over Santa Catalina with violent force, as if the storm itself wanted to wash the entire bay away. Lightning split the sky, illuminating Ethan's cold, expressionless face as he stepped onto the porch. Lydia followed close behind her umbrella, slipping from her hand, the wind whipping her hair. Yet she maintained that same polished mask of false composure. Clara said nothing. She stood beneath the awning, her back straight, her gaze fixed on her son. The rain splashed against her face, but she didn't wipe it away. In her gray eyes, there was no longer fear, only a chilling calm. Ethan spoke first. "Mother, we need to talk." About what her voice was low, firm, about Thomas, about the money. "I just want to make sure no one's taking advantage of you." Clara let out a dry laugh. "Taking advantage. Are you talking about the man who's taken care of both of us for months? Or are you talking about the inheritance you think you're losing?" Lydia stepped forward, her voice smooth as silk, though her eyes were sharp as blades. "Mother, I think we all want what's best. It's just, people are saying things about your relationship with Mr. Mayfield. I want to protect your reputation." Clara tilted her head slightly. "My reputation. The same one you traded for a few fake tears in front of a camera. Don't worry about my reputation. It's still intact. It's your greed that's falling apart." Lydia's face paled. Ethan interjected quickly, his voice tense. "Mother, please don't talk like that. I didn't come here to argue." Clara looked straight at him. "Really? Or did you come to claim what you believe you're owed?" Ethan froze, then spoke quickly. "Thomas isn't well. He could be mentally affected. I just want to make sure everything he signed is legitimate." Clara gave a faint smile. "Legitimate? You're only afraid because you know it is." The rain pounded harder on the roof, drumming against the steps like an omen. Nora stepped out, phone in hand. "Grace is on her way. Should I call the police if they don't leave?" Ethan spun around sharply. "There's no need for lawyers. This is a family matter." Family. Clara's voice cut through the air, cold and metallic. Family doesn't throw their mother out of her house on a stormy night. Family doesn't hire the media to drag her name through the mud. Don't call this family. Ethan's breath came fast, his eyes flaring with anger. "You're being manipulated. You're not thinking clearly." Clara moved closer, her steps slow and deliberate. "If I'm not thinking clearly, my son, then how am I standing here? How do I know you just lied to me?" Lydia grabbed her husband's arm. "Ethan, let's go. This isn't helping." But Ethan ignored her. He pulled a stack of papers from his jacket, sealed in plastic to protect it from the rain. "If you really want clarity, sign this. It's a simple agreement confirming that you haven't been coerced and that you're willing to share the assets." Nora stepped forward to block him. "She's not signing anything." Ethan glared. "Step aside. This is my family's business." Clara raised a hand to stop Nora. She took the papers and flipped through them carefully. The ink still smelled fresh, the legal language cold and precise. Between the polished lines were the traps hidden beneath the surface, temporary power of attorney shared benefit clauses and conditional asset transfers. Clara set the papers on the wooden table under the porch. "Impressive," she said softly, "but not enough." Then, in one swift motion, she reached for the lighter on the table, flicked it on, and touched the flame to the edge of the papers. The fire caught instantly, curling the pages as they burned glowing orange in the wind. Lydia screamed, "Have you lost your mind?" Clara's voice was calm. "No, I'm just cleaning the trash out of my house." Ethan lunged forward to stop her, but Nora stepped between them. "Touch her, and I'll call the police." Ethan froze, his breath quick and shallow. The flickering firelight illuminated his face, revealing not anger, but fear. When the flames died, only ash remained scattered by the rain. Clara turned toward the house, taking a towel to dry her face. Her voice was soft but firm, every word cutting through the air. "You want what I have? Then try again in daylight, where everyone can see. Tonight you leave my home." Ethan stood still, staring at her for a long moment. His expression faltered, then broke. Without another word, he turned and walked back into the storm. Lydia followed silently. The gate closed behind them, their car fading into the night, leaving only the scent of smoke and the mist of rain. Nora exhaled. "You're not afraid?" Clara watched the ashes dissolving in the puddles. "Of course I'm afraid. But fear is useless now. When they fight with fire, I have to learn to hold it." Inside, her phone buzzed. A message from Grace appeared on the screen. "Stay calm. I'm preparing the paperwork. They'll be back, but next time it won't be with words, it'll be with the law." Clara nodded slowly and turned off the screen. She looked out at the sea where the waves crashed louder and harder. "All right," she whispered. "If they want war this time, I won't lose." 2 days after the storm, Santa Catalina seemed washed clean. The The sky was a deep, endless blue, and sunlight spilled over the sea like molten gold. But inside Clara, the storm had not yet passed. Every morning when she woke, she felt as if she were living in the fragile calm that comes just before another tempest. Nora brought in an express envelope carefully sealed. "It's from them again," she said quietly. Clara opened it. Inside was a copy of a legal document, a petition for financial and mental competency evaluation, filed by Ethan and Lydia with the county court. At the bottom, beneath their signatures, was a statement. "We are concerned that Mrs. Clara Mayfield is being manipulated by her ailing brother and a group of lawyers with the intent of seizing her assets." Clara's hand tightened around the paper. "They're not human anymore." Nora looked at her eyes filled with both worry and admiration. "Grace is on her way. She said we have to act fast or they'll have grounds to open an investigation." By afternoon, Grace arrived. Her face was as calm as ever, but her tone was sharper than usual. "I've reviewed everything. We won't just respond, we'll strike back. I've gathered enough proof that Ethan transferred funds into media accounts to pay for smear campaigns. The moment they move again, we'll countersue for defamation and emotional harassment." Clara nodded, her voice soft. "I don't want revenge, Grace. I just want them to stop." Grace closed her briefcase. Sometimes the only way to make them stop is to make them afraid. That night, waves crashed gently on the sand below the house. Clara couldn't sleep. She opened her small journal and wrote carefully each word, steady and deliberate. "Day 9, they're attacking through the law. But my hands no longer shake. This time, I'm rewriting the story one word at a time." The next morning, Nora woke her early. "There's someone at the gate. Says he's from a financial consultancy." Clara stepped outside and saw a middle-aged man in a tailored suit holding a briefcase. "Good morning, Mrs. Mayfield. I've been authorized to review the asset transfer documents between you and Mr. Thomas Mayfield. It's just a standard procedure, won't take long." Clara stared at him. "Authorized by whom?" The man hesitated for a moment. "Your family, ma'am, specifically your son, Mr. Ethan Mayfield." Clara smiled faintly. "I see." She slowly closed the gate, her voice low but firm. "Tell your employer that next time my lawyer will be the one to speak with you." That very evening, Grace filed an official report with the State Department of Justice, attaching evidence of impersonation and unlawful interference. Now Grace said they're the ones being watched. Late that night, Clara stepped out onto the balcony. The sea shimmered black like velvet under the moonlight. The reflection of the moon danced on the waves as the sound of the tide brought a fleeting peace to her heart. Then her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Don't think you can hide behind your lawyer forever. We know where Thomas is." Clara froze, then called Grace immediately. "They're going after my brother." Grace's voice was cold as steel. "Good. Then we finally have grounds for a full-scale counterattack." The next morning, Clara went to the hospital. Thomas was asleep, his face thin but peaceful. She took his hand gently and whispered, "Don't worry, I'll protect you and everything you believe in." In the hallway, Nora was waiting, her expression resolute. "They may win on the internet," she said, "but they'll lose in real life. I won't let them get near him." Clara nodded. "And no one will touch me again either." As she stepped out of the hospital, the wind carried the scent of salt and lavender from the nearby gardens. She looked up at the vast blue sky. For the first time, Clara didn't feel like the hunted. She was the one leading the charge in the battle ahead, a battle not just to defend her fortune, but to defend the final dignity of a mother who refused to be broken. That afternoon, Santa Catalina was bathed in pale sunlight. Clara had just returned from the hospital when she saw Nora standing by the gate, her face tense. "There's someone waiting for you inside," she said quietly. A woman who claims to be a journalist. She says she wants to interview you about the lawsuit and about Mr. Thomas." Clara narrowed her eyes. "What's her name?" She said her name is Celia Moore from the Daily Viewpoint. Clara nodded. "Let her in. If they want a story, I'll make sure they hear it my way." In the living room, a young woman with chestnut hair and a thick notebook stood to greet her. "Mrs. Mayfield, thank you for seeing me. I'm here to hear your side of the story. Public opinion seems to favor your son's claim that you're being manipulated. I want to know the truth." Clara sat down, slowly pouring herself a cup of tea. "The truth doesn't change no matter how many times people rewrite it. I'm not being controlled by anyone. I'm simply learning how not to bow anymore." Celia scribbled notes, her eyes sharp with curiosity. "Do you have any proof of that?" Clara smiled faintly. "I don't need proof. I have memory and the law. Neither can be bought." Their conversation lasted nearly an hour. When Celia finally left, Nora closed the door and looked at Clara with admiration. "You spoke like someone ready to stand in court." Clara replied softly, "I'm not afraid of the courtroom. I'm only afraid of silence." That evening, Grace called. "I've just received word. Ethan has officially filed a lawsuit accusing you of exploiting a sick man to seize his assets. But I have better news. The court has granted our motion to countersue for forgery and defamation." Clara sat quietly listening to Grace's steady voice through the phone. "They forged documents. Do we have evidence?" Grace's tone lifted slightly. "We do. I have the contract Lydia signed with the so-called media company and the bank receipts from Ethan's account. When this reaches court, we won't just win, we'll make sure they can't recover." Clara exhaled slowly. "I'm not happy to see them fall, Grace. I just want them to stop." There was a pause before Grace replied, "You're a good person, but being good isn't enough in this world. They'll understand that when they hear the verdict." That night, Clara sat by the window, watching moonlight shimmer across the ocean. She thought of the years she had spent raising Ethan, remembering how he once sat in her lap and promised to take care of her one day. Now that same sun had dragged her into a battlefield. A cold breeze swept through, making her shiver. She whispered to herself, "Blood may run dry, but justice never will." The next morning, Nora opened the door to collect the mail. Among the usual envelopes was a gray one with no sender listed. Clara opened it. Inside was a photograph of her standing beside Thomas in the hospital, but it had been edited. Her face distorted her eyes, hollow, lifeless. Beneath the picture were scrawled words, "People believe what they see." Clara stared at the photo for a long moment. "They're playing dirty," she said quietly. "But if they want a war of images, I'll show them my real face." That evening, she called Celia. "I want to finish my story," she said. "This time, bring a camera." 2 days later, the article appeared on the front page with the headline, "The Woman Accused of Greed by Her Own Son, a Story of Trust and Betrayal." The piece spread quickly. Thousands of comments flooded in, and public opinion shifted overnight. People no longer called her manipulative. They called her the mother betrayed by her own family. When the article went viral, Ethan called. His voice trembled, though he tried to sound calm. "Mother, what are you doing? You're destroying me. You're making me lose everything." Clara answered softly, "No, my son. You lost everything yourself the moment you forgot who gave you everything." She ended the call feeling an unexpected peace. Outside, the ocean glimmered in the afternoon sun. Clara knew the legal battle had yet to begin, but the tide of public opinion had turned. And in this world, sometimes justice arrives not from a courtroom, but from the light of truth, whether through an article, a video, or a woman brave enough to stand tall and say, "I am not wrong." A gentle breeze passed through the porch, and Clara smiled faintly. She knew a greater storm was coming, but this time it would sweep away those who had summoned it. The next morning, Clara woke early. The first light of dawn streamed through the curtains, painting the room in soft shades of pink. On the table lay yesterday's newspaper, the article about her still spread wide across the page. Nora entered, setting down a cup of hot tea, her voice a mix of concern and pride. "You've made the whole city talk about you, Clara. People are starting to ask who Ethan really is." Clara said nothing, her eyes resting on the small caption beneath the photo. The story of a woman's rebirth after losing everything. She smiled faintly. Not rebirth, Nora. Return. But the calm did not last long. The phone rang. It was Grace. "Get ready, Mrs. Clara. The court has set the hearing date. 3 weeks from now." 3 weeks, Clara repeated softly. Enough time for them to show how far they're willing to go. Grace lowered her voice. "I also received news that Ethan has hired a new lawyer, one known for being ruthless. They'll try to prove you're mentally unfit." Clara laughed quietly. "How ironic. I've been perfectly sane my entire life raising that boy, and now I have to prove it to a judge." That afternoon, she went to the hospital. Thomas looked weaker than before, lying in bed, while the heart monitor beeped slowly beside him. When he saw her, he smiled faintly. "I heard you're going to court," he said. "Yes," she answered, "but I'm not afraid." Thomas looked straight into her eyes, pride gleaming through the fatigue. "I know you're not afraid. I just wish I had the strength to stand beside you." Clara took his hand gently. "You've done enough. Now it's my turn to protect us both." When she returned home, Nora met her with new information. They were here. "A strange man asked the guard about you, said he was an old friend who wanted to visit." Clara nodded. "Ethan doesn't have the courage to face me, so he sends someone to watch." She opened the window, the night air heavy with salt. "If they want to watch, let them. Let them see I'm not hiding. I was once thrown out into the rain with nothing. What else is left to fear?" Later that night, Nora found an envelope left at the door. Clara opened it to find a single sheet of paper with trembling handwriting. "Mother, I'm sorry." There was no signature, but she recognized Ethan's hand immediately. She traced the letters with her fingers, her heart stirring for a brief moment. "An apology isn't an ending," she whispered. "It's only the beginning of the truth." Outside, the sea was dark and restless. Waves crashed hard against the cliffs, spraying white foam high into the air like the cry of a wounded heart. Clara closed the window, her eyes no longer sorrowful. In the silence, she murmured to herself as if making a vow. 3 weeks. Just 3 weeks, and every lie will end. As the night wind swept through the house, the woman who had once been cast aside stood quietly in the darkness, her eyes shining like tempered steel. The battle ahead was no longer about reputation or wealth. It was about reclaiming the justice she had spent half her life silently surrendering. 3 weeks passed like a single sharp breath. On the morning of the trial, the sky over Santa Catalina was gray and heavy clouds pressing low above the sea. Clara rose before dawn. She dressed in a simple navy blue dress, slipped on a light coat, and carefully pinned the silver brooch Thomas had once given her. Nora stood behind her, adjusting the collar gently. "You look strong," she said softly. Clara smiled. "Today isn't about fighting with noise, Nora. It's about showing them that truth doesn't need to shout." Grace's car pulled up in front of the courthouse. The entrance was crowded with reporters' flashes flickering like lightning. Clara stepped out between the security lines as questions fired at her from every direction. "Mrs. Clara, did you exploit your sick brother? Your son claims you were manipulated. Is that true?" Clara did not answer. She only lifted her chin, her expression calm, as if no amount of flashing light could pierce the quiet strength she carried. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick and tense. Ethan and Lydia sat on the opposite side, dressed impeccably, their faces molded into masks of false sorrow. Behind them, a few journalists quietly took notes. Thomas was absent, his health too fragile, but the handwritten letter he had sent to the court had been accepted as evidence. The judge entered the gavel, struck 3 times. Grace stood and spoke with clear authority. The plaintiff's fabricated claims spread false information and attempted to forge legal documents to seize my client's rightful property. Ethan's lawyer countered quickly, arguing that Clara had been influenced and was no longer of sound mind. Clara sat still, listening to every word of slander, her eyes occasionally closing. She did not feel anger, only sorrow. Sorrow for the son she had once loved so deeply that she forgot herself. When it came time for the defense to present witnesses, the courtroom door opened. Nora walked in, tall and steady, her eyes sharp, holding a small recorder in her hand. She pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the room, clear and undeniable. As soon as she signs, we'll control the account. She won't even know. The words rang out like a blade cutting through silence. Lydia's face turned pale. Ethan tried to look up, but his lips trembled. The judge tapped the gavel lightly. This recording is admissible. Proceed. Grace then presented a series of emails, text messages, and bank transfers showing payments made to media companies and documents hiring a fake financial advisor. Each piece of evidence sliced away another layer of deceit. When it was Clara's turn to speak, she rose. Her voice was low and warm, carrying through the cold room. "I don't want my son to go to prison," she said. "I just want him to understand that no one has the right to decide another person's dignity, not even in the name of family. I've been silent for 40 years, and that silence made them think I was weak. But today I speak not for revenge, but for closure." The room fell utterly still. Only the sound of pens scratching and Ethan's strained breathing could be heard. The hearing lasted until almost noon, when the judge finally announced, "The petition of Ethan Mayfield is dismissed. The falsified evidence will be submitted to the prosecutor's office. For criminal investigation, all eyes turned to Clara." Ethan bowed his head. Lydia gripped his hand, whispering something no one could hear. Grace placed a hand on Clara's shoulder and whispered, "We've won." But Clara only shook her head gently. No one wins in this, Grace. There are only those who've learned what they needed to learn. As she stepped out of the courthouse, the sea wind hit her face. The reporters gathered again, but this time there were no cruel questions. A young female journalist called out, "Mrs. Clara, do you have anything to say to those who are being betrayed by their own family?" Clara paused, turned toward the cameras, and said clearly, "Remember, this trust is never lost. It only moves from those who don't deserve it back to yourself." Then she turned away, walking slowly down the courthouse steps, her eyes gleaming under the midday sun. The wind lifted her silver hair, carrying with it the faint scent of lavender, the scent of freedom of a woman who had weathered every storm and finally stepped out from her own shadow. That afternoon, Santa Catalina was drenched in sunlight. The sea was calm as if it had never known a storm. Clara sat on the porch, a cup of cold tea in her hand, her gaze lost on the horizon. The trial was over, the verdict clear, yet what she felt was not triumph, but a quiet emptiness, like the silence that follows a storm, leaving behind scattered fragments of memory drifting through her heart. Nora stepped outside and placed an envelope on the table. "You should read this," she said softly. Inside was a handwritten letter from Thomas, sent before the day of the trial. His handwriting was shaky but deliberate. "Clara, if you're reading this, it means the truth has come to light. I believe you've not only won in court, but also conquered the fear within yourself. Keep the Mayfield foundation. Turn it into a place where those who have suffered can find their strength again. I know you can do it just as you've done for yourself. Clara folded the letter, gently tears, falling even as a faint smile touched her lips. Somewhere she could almost feel Thomas's presence, like the whisper of wind through the leaves, like the steady rhythm of waves against the rocks below. Later that afternoon, Grace arrived carrying a folder. The prosecutor's office has opened a criminal investigation, she said. Ethan and Lydia could face serious charges. Do you want me to pursue it to the end? Clara thought for a long moment. No, I don't want to see my son in chains. Let justice do its part. I've already done mine. Grace nodded, her expression softening. I understand. You're one of the rare few who knows when to let go. As night fell, Clara stepped out onto the balcony. Under the moonlight, the sea shimmered like silver. From inside, Nora turned on the porch light and placed an extra chair beside her. You should rest, she said. Clara smiled. No, I want to sit a little longer. I'm listening to the sound of peace, the one I forgot for half my life. After a while, Nora went back inside. Clara opened her old leather notebook and wrote a few lines. Day 10. No one can ever make my hand tremble when I write my name again. I've risen, and this time I will never bow my head. She closed the notebook and looked out at the sea. The waves lapped gently, and the moonlight touched the water, glittering like metal. In that moment, Clara understood that victory wasn't in the verdict or the fortune, but in the fact that she had learned to forgive not those who had hurt her, but the fragile woman she once was, who had trusted the wrong kind of kindness. That night, Clara slept soundly, the first dreamless sleep she'd had in years. Outside, the waves sang the song of the coming dawn, a new beginning for the woman who had walked through the storm and at last found her way back to herself. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window, bathing the room in a soft golden glow. Clara awoke feeling lighter, as if she had finally set down a weight she had carried for far too long. She stepped onto the porch, breathing in the salty scent of the sea and the faint fragrance of jasmine drifting through the breeze. Santa Catalina felt different today, peaceful, warm, and strangely enough, like the beginning of a new story. Nora brought her a cup of hot coffee, smiling. The whole city is talking about you, Clara. This morning's paper says, "The woman who taught the world a lesson in honor and faith." Clara chuckled softly. Honor doesn't need to be taught, Nora. It only needs to be lived truthfully. She sat down and opened the second letter Grace had sent. Inside was the completed proposal for the Mayfield Foundation, the charity Thomas had entrusted her to lead. His name was engraved on the cover page. In memory of Thomas Mayfield, the man who believed in kindness. Clara read every line carefully, her heart stilling as she went. The foundation would support elderly women suffering from financial abuse, the homeless and single mothers seeking to start anew. A simple dream, yet one filled with meaning. Nora looked at her, her voice calm and sincere. Mr. Thomas once said, "You weren't just a survivor, Clara. You're proof that people can be reborn through integrity." Clara smiled, her eyes distant. "No, Nora. I just did what any woman cornered by life would do, stand up." That afternoon, Grace arrived carrying 2 thick envelopes. These are the final documents, she said. One contains the official transfer of assets to the foundation. The other is an invitation from the mayor. He'd like you to speak at the foundation's opening next week. Clara looked surprised. "Speak? I've never been one for stages." Grace smiled. "But you're the one they want to hear. Sometimes silence must be spoken aloud so others can learn to listen." That evening, Clara sat before her mirror. She saw a woman with silver hair, a face lined with time, yet eyes bright and serene. She thought of everything that had brought her here, the night under the bridge, her son's cruel words, the courtroom bathed in light. All of it was like the somber notes of a song that had built to one final movement, the melody of freedom. A week later, the foundation's opening ceremony was held at the City Hall. Hundreds attended, elderly women, students, journalists, and those already helped by the foundation's pilot programs. On stage, a photograph of Thomas hung amid white flowers. Clara stepped to the podium, a brief speech in her hand. Under the bright lights, she did not tremble. "Thank you all for being here today." She began, her voice warm and steady. "Someone once told me that women over 60 should rest. I disagree. Age doesn't take our strength. It simply teaches us what's worth holding on to and what we must let go." In the audience, people nodded, some wiping tears. "I once lost everything," she continued, "my home, my faith, and even the child I loved most. But in losing, I learned something greater than any possession, that dignity is the one thing no one can take from you if you choose to stand again." Applause filled the hall, echoing like waves. The lights illuminated her face, each wrinkle telling its own story. Clara drew a deep breath, her voice trembling but proud. The Mayfield Foundation is not a place that gives out money. It's a place that gives back belief, the belief that every person, no matter how betrayed or broken, can rewrite the final chapter of their life with their own hands. When she stepped down, Grace approached her and whispered, "Thomas would be so proud." Clara looked up at her brother's photograph and replied, "He's still here, and I know he's smiling." The ceremony ended with the soft sound of piano music. A little girl ran up and handed Clara a small bouquet, whispering shyly, "I want to grow up to be strong like you." Clara knelt down, placing a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. "Be stronger than me, sweetheart. The world will need you." As the lights dimmed, Clara stood alone outside on the terrace, the cool night breeze brushing her face. From the distance came the steady rhythm of waves, patient and enduring, just like the life she had reclaimed with her courage. And in that quiet moment, Clara Mayfield knew one thing for certain: the storm had truly passed, and she had not only survived, she had prevailed. The next morning, Santa Catalina lay quiet beneath a veil of soft mist. Clara woke later than usual. The blanket was still warm, and the distant rhythm of the waves echoed like the steady heartbeat of a rare, peaceful day. On the table, Nora had left the morning paper and an envelope stamped with the blue seal of Ventura County Prison. Clara opened it. The handwriting was Ethan's uneven, tired. "Mother, I know I don't deserve to write to you, but after everything that's happened, I finally understand. I don't want to make excuses anymore. Lydia has left. I'm paying for my greed and my pride. You don't have to forgive me, but please don't forget that I was once a child who loved you sincerely. If you can visit me once, not out of pity, but for the sake of what we once were." Clara set the letter down, her hands trembling slightly. Nora stood beside her, speaking softly. "You don't have to go if it will hurt you." Clara shook her head gently. "No, Nora. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the only way to truly be free." By noon, she was driving toward Ventura. The prison sat in a valley surrounded by tall eucalyptus trees and the dry scent of wind and dust. A guard led her down a long, cold corridor. At the end sat Ethan, dressed in gray, his head bowed. When he saw her, he looked up, his eyes filled with surprise and unease. "Mother." His voice was hoarse. Clara sat across from him, a pane of glass separating them, their reflections overlapping, an image of a mother who had endured too much pain and a son lost, struggling to find his way back. "How are you?" she asked. Ethan gave a faint, weary smile. as well as someone can be when his mornings start with steel bars and the sound of locks. Do you know why I came? He said nothing, not out of anger and not out of pity. I came to tell you that I forgive you, but forgiveness doesn't mean I forget. Ethan lowered his head, tears falling onto his thin hands. I ruined everything. Clara replied softly, No. You only forgot the most important thing that money can buy attention, but it can never buy back trust. For a long moment, neither spoke. Sunlight filtered through the barred window, casting long stripes of light across the concrete floor. Before she left, Clara placed her hand against the glass, her voice gentle. I've lost many things, but I still have one belief that you can still find your way back. Ethan raised his hand to meet hers through the glass. I'll try, Mother, no matter how late it is. Leaving the prison, Clara stopped on the hill overlooking the sea. The wind blew hard, carrying the scent of salt and dry earth. She breathed deeply, feeling lighter than she had in years. Perhaps part of the storm had truly passed. By the time she returned home, the sun was sinking low. Nora met her at the gate. Are you all right? She asked. Clara smiled. I am. Forgiveness doesn't change the past, but it allows the future to begin. That night, she sat in her study and opened her journal, writing her final entry, Day 14. Peace doesn't come from victory, but from the moment you no longer feel the need to prove anything. Outside, the sea breeze stirred the curtains, carrying the scent of jasmine through the room. Clara closed the notebook and placed it beside Thomas's photograph. Moonlight streamed through the glass, illuminating his smiling face. She gazed at it for a long time before whispering, Do you see Thomas? I kept my promise. Then she stepped out onto the balcony, letting the wind tousle her silver hair. The sea before her was calm, mirroring the sky as it slowly faded into night. And in that silvery glow the woman once cast aside had become a symbol of faith, a reminder that sometimes the greatest victory in life is learning how to let go without losing yourself. 3 months had passed since Clara left Ventura prison, where she had faced her past and finally laid down the last of her burdens. Autumn had arrived in Santa Catalina. The leaves along the coastal roads were turning gold, and the ocean breeze carried a faint scent of salt. Inside the white villa overlooking the sea, her life had settled into a calm, meaningful rhythm. That morning, Nora opened the windows, letting the sea breeze rush in, carrying the fragrance of jasmine. Mrs. Clara, she said, today's the first meeting of the Mayfield Foundation's board. The press and television crews are already gathering outside. Clara smiled softly. Curiosity is good. At least it means they care about the right things. Before leaving, she stood before the mirror and adjusted her light-colored coat. Her silver hair was neatly tied up, and her reflection showed the calm dignity of a woman who had walked through pain to find the light of freedom. She looked at the small photograph on her desk. Thomas's gentle eyes and familiar smile seemed to follow her every step. Brother, she whispered today, we begin what you dreamed of, a home for lost souls. When her car arrived at the city hall, crowds were already waiting outside. Reporters clustered with cameras flashing while middle-aged women, many who had once received help from the foundation, stood with flowers in hand. A young woman rushed forward and hugged her tightly. Thank you, Mrs. Clara. Because of your foundation, my mother escaped an abusive husband and started her own small business. Clara gently patted her shoulder and said warmly, Don't thank me. Thank your mother who believed she deserved a better life. The meeting began inside a hall filled with sunlight. Behind the podium hung a white banner that read, Mayfield Foundation, because dignity has no age. Grace stood beside her reading the first report. In just 3 months, the foundation has supported more than 30 elderly women who lost their homes or were victims of financial abuse, opened 2 free legal counseling centers, and is now expanding into 3 more cities. Applause echoed through the hall, but Clara only nodded. To her, this was not an accomplishment, it was a beginning. When her turn came, she stepped to the podium. The spotlight illuminated her gentle face, etched with lines of time. Her voice was deep, steady, and resonant. Not long ago, I was a woman thrown out of her home by her own son in the middle of a storm. I sat in an old car, believing my life was over. But I realized that when you lose everything you finally see, who truly stands with you, and sometimes that person is yourself. She paused, scanning the audience where hundreds of eyes watched in silence. I'm not sharing this for sympathy. I'm sharing it to remind you never underestimate the strength of a heart that is endured. People can take your money, your home, your reputation, but no one can take your pride unless you let them. The hall erupted in applause and many wiped their tears. Clara smiled, her voice softening. The Mayfield Foundation doesn't just carry my brother's name. It represents people like him, and like all of us, those who learn to rise even after being pushed down. And I want to say to anyone who feels invisible, you have not been forgotten. You're simply waiting for your moment to be seen. The ceremony ended with the sound of a piano playing Moon River, the song Thomas used to play when they were young. Clara stood still, her eyes glistening. The melody felt like a circle completing itself from the little girl who once played piano in a shabby house to the woman who once slept in a car, now standing as the founder of a foundation that defends dignity. That evening, Clara returned to her villa. On the table lay a bouquet of fresh lavender and a letter from Ventura Prison. The note was brief. Mother, my sentence has been reduced. I'm studying accounting in prison now. I don't know if you still believe in me, but I'll try to make sure you're never ashamed of me again. When I'm released, I want to work for the Mayfield Foundation to help women like you and men like me. Clara read slowly, her lips trembling. She set the letter down and looked out the window. The sunset bathed the ocean in gold. Smiling softly, she whispered, "My son, perhaps this is what redemption truly looks like." That night, Nora prepared a simple dinner: vegetable soup, grilled fish, and a small glass of red wine. They ate quietly together. In the corner, the framed photo of Thomas reflected the candlelight as if he were smiling with them. Clara said gently, "My brother once told me, we can't choose how people treat us, but we can choose how we respond. Now, I finally understand. Forgiveness isn't an ending. It's another beginning." Nora nodded softly. "And you've begun again in the most beautiful way." After Nora went to bed, Clara stepped out onto the balcony. The sea breeze swept through her silver hair as she looked up at the sky where the brightest star flickered through the clouds. She remembered Grace's words from the courtroom. You didn't just defend your name, you changed the way people see older women. Clara smiled faintly. In her hand was her old leather journal, its final page still blank. She wrote her last entry, Day 30. I have walked through rain, tears, and betrayal to reach this point. I no longer seek justice, for justice lives within me. If one day someone asks what is stronger than love or fear, I will say it is faith in oneself. She closed the journal and placed it on the table. Moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating the page, so the words seemed to glow. That night, Santa Catalina was unusually quiet. The sea breeze rustled the palms, and waves brushed gently against the shore. Somewhere beyond the stars, perhaps Thomas was watching, smiling. And inside the small villa, the woman who had once been abandoned, who had once lost everything, now sat by the window with her eyes closed and a peaceful face. Clara Mayfield, the woman once erased from her own story, had written its perfect conclusion, a story not only of triumph, but of the quiet strength of kindness. And if you are hearing this, now remember this: no one can define your worth except you. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope. Because sometimes a single story is enough to remind someone lost in the dark that they can still begin again.